Welcome to Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and this is the first time I'm recording in 2016. It's a new year. I'm hoping that everybody had a good holiday. Mine was good. I had a really enjoyable time. I go visit my in-laws every year. I've done that for the last, more than a decade. And this year was good. This year was fun. It had to be better than last year because last year was rocky. I can only speak for myself, but I know that when I got to the annual family holiday gathering last year, I was not in a good way. I was tired. I was stressed out. I had all this work to do, all this pressure on me, and all I wanted to do was be by myself and not have to talk to anybody. But I was at the family holiday, and you're supposed to be there to connect with your family. So what do you do? What do you do when, like, the only time that you really see your family in the year, you get together, and that's the time you're supposed to, like, be with them, and then you're like, you're not in a way to be with them. You're not even capable of being with them. Just because you're in the same room with them doesn't mean you're, like, actually able to, like, be present with them and connect with them, you know? So I was not a fun guy to be around. I didn't contribute to that holiday in a good way, I don't think. And I felt bad about it. And I didn't communicate that. I didn't say anything. I didn't write anybody a note. I didn't talk. I just felt bad about it and just hope that they're my family and they'll forgive me. That's unconditional, you know? Which isn't a good plan. It's not a good plan. We should communicate when we feel bad about stuff. We should say sorry, which I guess I'm doing right now. But you see, this year I was determined. I was determined to do better, to, like, make more of an effort, and I really feel like I did. I felt like my brother-in-law did too. I felt like we did good. It was fun, and we had a good time, and I was happy for that. I felt like it was a really enjoyable holiday. However, I did get, like, a report, like, that my father-in-law still felt like we didn't do enough, and I was sort of surprised. I thought we did such a good job. Maybe I could have sat around and shoot the shit with my father-in-law more. I didn't do that as much. I mean, part of that was just because of the kids, you got the kids running around, just trying to be on top of that. But gosh, I thought we did good. I don't know if my father-in-law listens to this podcast. I mean, nobody said it. I didn't bring it up, and nobody has said, "Oh, I've been listening to your podcast." So I don't know. I don't know if they're listening. I mentioned my sister in the last podcast, and she didn't say anything, so I don't even know if she listens. I don't know if my family listens. I told my wife, because she's a little bit behind on some of the episodes. She hasn't been listening to all of them. I think she just hasn't listened to the last one. But I told her, I said, with the blog, I know sometimes she doesn't always read it, and it doesn't matter. Like, it's one of the things I like about my wife is that she doesn't. Some people read my blog every month, and they say nice things to me. And my wife, she does read my stuff, and, she's supportive, but she's not, like, she doesn't care. She doesn't care so much, and that's good for me, It brings me down to earth. And so, in any case, I said to her, you really, even if you just listen to the intros and the outros of the podcast, you should really listen to them, because I talk about stuff, and sometimes I talk about you, and you should probably listen to them. So I know that she's going to listen to this. And I do have something to say about that, because as good as the holiday went, I did, hear that her father wasn't so happy with everything. And so, I guess all I want to say is if you're listening, Ken, next year I'll make even more of an effort. I'm sorry if you felt like I slighted you at all. I certainly didn't mean to. And other than that, what else happened? Oh, gosh, what else happened is that I came home earlier. I came home earlier than my wife and daughter. My wife lets me do that because she knows it's hard for me to be away too long because I just have stuff to man here. And so I came back home, and I had 5 days while my wife and two daughters were still up there or down there. And so, I worked most of every day. And, even like on New Year's, I spent like 5 hours priming and painting walls at the yoga center, do some touch up. And so, I work. I don't have to do parent duties, but it wasn't like I was just sitting around doing nothing. I was taking care of a lot of things. And in any case, when my wife got back into town, I felt like there was like a lot of resentment. She said, it was sort of like, well, you had your 5 days, like now you have to have everything. And it's like I just turn everything off, and I get it, when you have to be sole parent. I mean, anybody who's listening to this who like is raising kids all on their own, my heart goes out to you. It's rough, when you have to be the sole parent and you don't get any downtime. It's just you. And the way my 6-year-old is right now, it's just draining. If you're tired, oh my gosh. So I totally get it, and I definitely did my best to like, all right, and like drop some stuff and just like take care of the kids so she could have some time, but it is hard. I mean, like even just the 5 days that they were gone, like I totally healed up my hip. My hip had been bothering me and it felt great. And then like within like a day and a half of them being back, it's like, oh my God, I got the hip pain again. And I know part of it's just, maybe that's just like that's the way our minds and bodies work, But it is just, there's so much honest. And I know I'm not the only one out there who feels like that. Like you get away for the holiday for a little while and it like slows down a little and then you're back in your life again. And like now we're all back in the swing and, we got to try to keep it together. And I guess I want to say one other thing. I was talking to my friend today, actually. Her name's Andrea, and she was talking about her holiday. And she was talking about her husband, and they hosted their family. And I said, "Oh wow, how'd it go?" And she said, "Oh, it was good. I had a good plan." And she sort of mentioned how her husband sort of like naysayed having to have a plan. And I had to laugh because I totally have done that. Where my wife's like, "Well, what are we gonna eat? What are we gonna do? We got to come up with a plan." And I'm like, "Why do we have to plan everything? Why can't we just let the night unfold?" And she gets very upset with me about that. And, I think there are some occasions where it is better to just not plan and let things unfold. But when it comes to the holidays, I think you got to have a plan. You got to have a plan. You don't want to be standing around, not sure what you're going to eat or what you're going to do. You gotta have something in the works. So, it's just interesting in terms of the dynamics in relationships and the way that, I see something or the way that my wife sees something and that we can communicate about it. I mean, I talked about this before. Last time I talked about my wife that like the key is we got to be able to talk about it. You got to be able to talk about it. So maybe that's what the holidays is about, really. Like getting together with your family means having to, kind of deal with yourself and with them. And I think that's a good thing. Just stop being such a jerk about it. I think I've got my own damage. Got some family stuff, but not for now. So happy New Year to everybody. I guess I should say happy New Year to you. Although I finally figured out what I don't like about happy. I've talked about this before. Like, what's my problem with happy? Like, what's the problem with saying happy? And I think that the reason I find myself having an issue with it, is I don't think of happy as like a state of mind. Like, I feel happiness as like an emotion that I would have, But it's not that I am happy, I feel happy. And maybe is that stupid? Is that like a stupid semantics parsing I'm doing? But I think it is more than just semantics, Like, if happiness is a state of mind, are we supposed to be able to achieve it? And then if we're able to achieve it, how long are we supposed to be in it? And then if it goes away, are we supposed to search for it again? That when we think of happiness as this state of mind, it feels totally abstract to me. I don't even know what it means, I've written about it before in terms of depression. Like, I know that that's like a clinical diagnosis, but when I say I am depressed or I feel depressed, I don't even know what that means sometimes, then there's all these other emotions I would have that are there in that, Although I guess depression sometimes means that you're not feeling emotion. You're just, I don't know. Maybe I don't know why I have a problem. I guess you know what it is? I have a problem when it feels like we're being given an idea about life or ourselves that isn't really attainable, that it puts us in this place where it's like a carrot that's just dangled out in front of you, like happy New Year. Here's the carrot. And then what? If your life doesn't feel happy, then your year's for crap. I don't know. I want you to all feel happiness in your lives. I want the next year to be full of good experiences, and I want us to feel happiness in those experiences. Maybe there's other words. Maybe I should say joyful New Year, or financially lucrative New Year to you. No, neither of those. They sound terrible. Just be Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody listening. Forgive me that. It's rolling into the new year, and I'm happy to say that we're definitely on the new schedule with the podcast. We got another one coming next week with Lilia Mead, who is a pioneer of yoga in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and we have a very cool conversation. That's going to be next week. Thank you to everybody who gave me some reviews on iTunes. There's a few, like just one review, but like some stars. I got some stars. Like we actually have a customer rating now based on 7 reviews. Appreciate that. Thank you. If anybody else wants to hook me up with some reviews, you go to iTunes to do that. You can subscribe and write us a review. Other than that, I'm excited to share this talk with you with Ray Greenberg from yogalifestyle.com. As you'll learn, I know Ray for a lot of years. He's the guy I get my mats from. And, he's an independent owner-operator, as he put it himself. And I really have always appreciated that. Like, there's a guy I can talk to on the phone if there's ever any kind of issues with any of my yoga supplies, And I really appreciate that about Ray and what he does. And so I had this really cool talk with him, and I learned about him, and I want to share it with you today. I hope you guys will enjoy it. Maybe on the other side, we'll talk about a few other things going into the future. But just to say again, I hope everybody had a good holiday. I'm wishing you a joyous new year. And please enjoy this talk with Ray. Good to go with you? Everything on your side?
I guess so. I've got a cup of water nearby and some cough drops.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Me too. I got to tell you, I am threading a very fine needle today. Because normally Monday's my day to do this kind of stuff, but my wife got called into work last minute. So I just put my 1-year-old down, and I got my other one on a TV show. And now I'm down here with you. So I'm happy to talk to you today.
Great.
How are you doing? How's your day going?
Pretty good. It's Cyber Monday.
Yeah.
And so that's just watching. It's funny. Cyber Monday hasn't really been our great day. But we got a lot of orders over the weekend.
Huh.
And it's funny. The business is a fourth quarter business, which also sort of surprised me. I didn't really think the yoga supplies would be seasonal.
Huh. They do go along with like a lot of other sales just the same, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's get to that actually. So let's give anyone who's listening to this some context. The reason I know you is because I started ordering mats from you for the yoga center I think it's got to have been, maybe 5 years now?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was back when you bought Becca. So when was that?
Well, I can check that. I think it was right before the recession. Was that like 2007?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I
Right.
opened in 2000, so it might have been just after that. Because I remember that I had like stocked up the center with like my initial props through Becca, and then when I went to go like reorder some stuff, that's when the switchover had happened. But before we get to that, did you have yogalifestyle.com before you bought over the Becca stuff?
Yeah, sure. I actually yogalifestyle.com has a funny history in itself. It was just the name I chose for a website for my own teaching of yoga.
Huh.
Right. So I had this site, yogalifestyle.com. I taught a few classes locally. Um, and then while I had that website, I also had an art publishing business. I was selling mass market lithographs in large quantities to major framers and plaque manufacturers.
Hmm.
Just a very different business. It was the sort of wall decor that ended up in Kmart and Walmart and stuff like that.
All right.
Um,
And how did you get to that?
well, it was something that my mom and my stepfather had been in.
Huh.
And I had actually studied communications and television production. And I was just hanging around the house at one time in between jobs. And I started working at the office. And one thing led to another. And I was in that business.
Right.
And then I actually made my career with some other people where I became the vice president of sales and marketing for a big company that did that.
Okay.
And then I didn't like working for a big company that did that.
I see. I
Right.
see. I see. And
Yeah.
so you bought the domain yogalifestyle.com thinking about moving in a different direction or thinking about moving into yoga. Were you already practicing yoga at that time? How did yoga come into the picture?
Yeah, well, yoga was always there. I've been practicing since I was like 11 or 12 years old.
Hmm.
And so I loved yoga. And I didn't really, I guess, get serious about yoga in a certain way until I was older. I had been married, and I think a lot of people come to yoga at a point of crisis or some sort of inflection point. And certainly it became more attractive to me as something important when after my divorce.
Hmm.
And I was feeling really low. I was wondering who I was. I was questioning a lot of things. And it just, luckily at that time, I ran into Dharma Mitra.
Oh, right. I read that in your bio that you did his first ever training. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I was in
Wow.
his first ever teacher training. And that was after I had been hanging around with him for a number of years.
I remember, I came into the yoga world probably around like 95 or so. And everybody studied with Dharma at some point. Like I remember
Right.
Sharon and David from Jivamukti, they studied with him. Like he was just like a stalwart in New York area, you know?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so where did you meet him?
Yeah, I met him. This is also just this like crazy story. I was driving down the road up here in New Paltz, New York, which is about, I guess, 60, 70 miles northwest of Manhattan.
Yeah, my wife and I know it well. We considered moving up to Saugerties at one point, but we couldn't really make it happen. I love it up there in the Hudson Valley. It's beautiful.
Yes, it's gorgeous country. And I saw an old girlfriend of mine jogging along the road. And this was sometime around Christmas, New Year period at that time. And I stopped to just say hello. And we got to talking, and one thing led to another. And she said, would you like to come with me? I'm thinking about going to this yoga retreat in the Catskills. Right? And at that time, I would have done anything this woman had asked me to do. I was just very enamored with her, and I was delighted to have something fun to do with her. And I wasn't really that focused on the yoga, although I was obviously a practitioner. And So anyway, so we went over at that time. Dharma had a retreat center in Horton, New York, which is near Livingston Manor, um, and it's about an hour from here. And very quickly, I just became enamored with Dharma. There was only about 7 people at this yoga retreat, and we were with him for 2 or 3 days, sometime between Christmas and New Year's, and it was just amazing. We were doing hammerhead yoga, things that I hadn't done since I was a kid.
Hmm.
Um,
I
you
know
know,
he's quite the monkey man. He does all that stuff to this day, you know. To his credit, you know, he's somebody who does everything himself that he teaches.
yes, yeah, it was really fun, and he loved to pit people against each other.
What do you
He
mean? What
didn't.
do you mean by that? What do you mean by pit people against each other?
Well, he would see who could do what, and he would try to. Well, I don't think this is ascribing to him motive.
Okay.
Okay, and certainly he wasn't saying go 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 or something like that. But he could see that I was very competitive, I think, and he liked to give me whatever was at the edge of what I could do.
I see. So he gave you what you were looking for to some degree.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you know, I want to get back to that. I think there's an interesting thread there in terms of yoga practice. But before we get into like some of that, I want to keep going with how you got to yogalifestyle.com. So you
Right. Okay. So here I am, a devotee of Dharma Mitra. It turns out that after this initial meeting, I just went to every retreat in Horton that I could.
So you mean
Because
like other teachers, not just Dharma?
no, he owned
Dharma
the
was your
retreat.
teacher, the main guy you're going to.
Right. Yeah. He owned the retreat center. They used to have retreats once every month, once every other month. In the spring and summer, I had worked out a deal with them where I would mow the lawn. It was like a 2-acre lawn or something, and I would get out there once every few weeks and mow, and then I could go to the retreats for free.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, it was fantastic because it was expensive and I loved it, and I would go as much as I could. I got to know them, Dharma and Eva, when I say them, and actually Dove, who's now on the circuit right now with his wheel, right, the Dharma Yoga wheel.
Oh, right, yes.
So I've known Dove since he was a kid.
Okay.
Since he was little, I used to take him skiing when he didn't like to be outside in the cold, and his sister Dahlia. Anyway, so we. I was hanging around a lot. I knew them. And eventually they were so comfortable with me and they knew I was an art publisher that they asked me, mostly people know this, but maybe some people don't. But Dharma has this wonderful poster, the master chart of 908 asanas.
Oh, yes, I've seen it. That's in almost all the centers, that big, huge poster of him doing all those poses.
That's right.
So you were involved in that?
Well, the funny part was when I first went to the retreat center, I had no idea. I had seen the poster like you had, at a local retreat center, or a local yoga studio rather. But I always thought it was drawings, and I didn't realize it was little photographs of a man doing yoga, and that man was Dharma Mitra, right? So no, I just was a fan like anybody else who thought the poster was great. I guess by that time I had one in my dining room because after my wife cleared out all the furniture, my ex had cleared out all the furniture. I kind of made the dining room into a little ashram, and
okay. So you took that as a blessing.
That's right.
The space got cleared.
Yeah, and I had some beautiful yoga posters, that being one of them, and then the multiple Om poster that from Martin Brading that was in there, and I had a wingback chair, this huge leather wingback chair that I could sit in the Pharaoh pose and meditate and stuff. And, anyway, and overlooking some beautiful scenery in my backyard.
So I'm starting to see the bleed over between art production and Dharma Mitra, because did you put out his poster or something? Is that where we're going?
Well, I didn't, but later I did. Yeah. So, Dharma, has totally created the poster on his own back in the 70s, when I was 10 or 12 years old or whatever. Probably when I started practicing, he was working on the poster. But then after they knew me for a few years, here's what would happen when they would publish the poster. They would get 1,000 copies, and they would have 50 copies in 20 different tubes, these huge 4-foot tubes at 9 inches wide. And they would be under the beds at the retreat center. They'd be in the closets at the yoga center. They'd have them in their apartment. They'd just be everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And they couldn't keep track of them. Like they'd lose, some, they'd be in the basement. They'd get forgotten about. It was just the craziest thing. Right. So at one point, Eva asked me if I would be interested in helping out by putting the large 908 on the floor of my warehouse. And I said, sure, but, if I'm going to do that, I'd like to also be able to sell it, because that's what I do. I sell posters. And so she said, fine, that's great. And I took a little 1-inch classified ad in Yoga International magazine at that time, and they've sort of gone out of business. They're
online now, so
right, exactly. Yeah. That's it. So they kind of gone through a lot of changes over there. Now they're online. And so anyway, but back in the day, they were, a magazine sort of like Yoga Journal, with, I guess, more of a closely focused spiritual bent.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I always loved them, and so it was natural for me to be in there. And I took this little 1-inch classified for Dharma's poster, and we sold enough to pay for the ad, and I realized that, well, geez, if I had a way of putting a little more in there, I could actually make some money doing this, right? So I said, well, geez, I have this website, yogalifestyle.com. That was just my...
And you already have a warehouse for the art prints, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have the posters and stuff. I said I could get a few more posters. I could put them on my website. And I could put a link to my website. I mean, this is very early in the
I know.
internet.
I mean, this is early times for internet, even.
Right.
There wasn't any Amazon.
No.
There wasn't any Gaiam like it is now.
No. It was like figuring it out as you went along, and it was really,
early days.
Yeah, it was fun. So I got that the Ohm poster by Martin Brading because I had it in my living room. I said so I tracked him down, and I tracked down this yoga chakra chart from Italy, and I had these 3 posters, and I added them to the ad, and the next thing you know, I'm actually making a little money doing this, and I'm thinking this is pretty good. I have 3 posters and a little business.
People want yoga posters.
Right. Well, that's, the cool part for me at that time was I had a market insight that these things were typically in the hands of individuals or devotees or, somebody like that. And the only way you got them was if you knew the people or if you knew somebody who knew them or, they were just really hard to get.
Right.
And so you had to really travel in the right circles to have yoga posters. And I'm like, well, dude, if you put these things on your website, everybody in the world has access to them.
I know. Well, that kind of brings us there because I remember when I was opening the center and I needed to get, mats and blankets to stock up for the center. Mm-hmm. I had this one mat that I had been using, and back in the day there was only those light blue ones. They only had them in light blue. But I searched, and at that time I was a little bit savvy for the internet. It was early times, so there wasn't even Google. It was Alta Vista and stuff. You know what I mean? It wasn't. It was you remember, it was a different time.
Yeah.
And I managed to find the folks of BeccaYoga.com or Becca.com, I think it was.
Right.
And it was just this husband and wife. I think they were in New Mexico or something.
Yeah, Gary and Marn were in Arizona.
Yeah, and I called the number and Gary picked up and we had this like nice long conversation. He like walked into the back and helped me pick out what colors and it was such a personal
Yeah.
one-to-one thing. And later on, I had sent them one of my blog posts and they were really into it. And just like I had this really personal relationship with this lovely couple that sold yoga props.
Uh-huh.
And
Well,
then one time I called and he's like, I got to let you know, we're selling the business. And I remember it's funny because I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get the mats? And he wasn't sure about you yet, I don't think. So he was almost going to give me the source. But then when he like met you, he said that you were really great. And he didn't want to do that. So he just pushed me off over to you, which was totally fine by me. I just wanted to get the mats that I needed.
Sure.
And so since then, it's cool because you and I, we've had like at least a dozen conversations, but they're probably usually about 10 minutes long. I say,
Right.
oh, can I get my usual order? And you say, yeah, sure. Should I charge it on the same card,
Yeah. I mean,
So now it's nice that what happened for me was I went from one kind of personal relationship to another person that I could actually talk to. And
yes.
that's what's not usually the case,
Yeah,
So say a little bit of something. I just rambled on. Say something about how you met them and how you ended up getting Becca, because it seems like you started with 3 posters, but then it decided to grow from there.
Yeah. The way it grew from there was I just kept putting in things that I loved. Okay, so like I used Light on Yoga. I bought 100 copies of Light on Yoga. I used the Shivananda, Guide to Yoga, the little black book. It's changed a number of times since then, but so I bought 100 copies of that. And I started putting things on the site that I thought were valuable, and I built it in that way to where I had maybe 1,200 SKUs or something, quite a few items, but I wasn't really so much drawn to gear. I wasn't involved in yoga props very much because Dharma wasn't really much into gear. Everybody around there had a yoga mat, but we each got them wherever we got them. We weren't really caring that much about it. And it wasn't like the Iyengar tradition where the props are very important to the practice.
Right.
I always said that if I ever went to prison, I'd be all set, because all I needed was a little 6 by 2 foot plot of concrete, and I'd be like happy doing my yoga.
Yeah, I hear you. I was a little bit prop heavy at one point, but then I did feel like at a certain point that can be like a crutch, like you can't do your yoga if you don't have your props.
Right.
And I was like, no, I want to be able to practice without anything. So I hear you there.
Yeah, and sort of this anti-prop mentality was something I had to get over. As I matured in the yoga world.
Well, that's interesting to me too, because as I've gotten older and I've ended up moving in a more therapeutic direction, that's when props actually are very useful. Like they don't have to be a crutch; they can just be really helpful from time to time.
Right, exactly. So it's really funny. I mean, this whole journey of selling yoga stuff has been like an amazing eye opener for me. I mean, I remember when, and this is kind of getting a little far afield, but when Ashtanga first came out, and we called ourselves Ashtanga yogis. We were
because Ashtanga yoga is in the sutras. Everybody, yeah,
right. We were practicing the 8 limbs,
right?
And we thought we were Ashtanga yogis until Ashtanga became associated with jumping around and breaking a sweat. Right. And and doing all that stuff, and it's not that we never broke a sweat because we practiced hard.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Ashtanga Vinyasa, what people now consider Ashtanga yoga.
Right. Well, I think that's the distinction I always make. I think there's Ashtanga, which is the 8 limbs, and then there's Ashtanga Vinyasa, which is kind of the style.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good distinction. But at first, I think we felt somebody had co-opted. Had kind of stolen our thing,
yeah.
And, rebranded something while we were in the middle of doing it. It's a little strange, but and then getting over that, and then realizing that they're not our enemies. They're not doing anything wrong. they're actually bringing a lot of people into yoga who might not otherwise find their way into yoga.
Right.
And that was really great. And, and so, like I said, there's been a lot of growth and understanding and broadening, as yoga has developed and changed in the U.S. for me. Anyway,
I think that's true. I think that's true for a lot of people. But get back to getting the Becca folks.
Getting Becca. So what happened was, so now I have this yoga supply business, but it's very heavy on the posters, on the books, not so much on the gear. I did buy a container of mats from Asia, and I had some yoga mat bags, which I really loved that I had. Anyway, so I had a few things out there, but not very much. And one of my suppliers who was selling me a yoga mat bag at one time, she had heard from somebody that Baker was for sale. Mm-hmm. And so she thought I might be interested, and it was just a super fit for a number of reasons. One was that they had these wonderful 100% cotton bolsters that they hand stuffed in Arizona. And the covers were made in India, and they were made to Iyengar specifications, and they're beautiful things. And they had a number of items that just, had super quality, as you identified with the yoga mats, the long life mats.
They're the best ones. I mean, without a doubt, in terms of durability, for sure.
That's right. And they're super grippy, and people love them. Well, so it's just sort of like...
And you know what else? I want to say something else about them, because when I went to open the center, I wanted to be eco, So I did a lot of research into the eco yoga mats that were available. And what I learned was that, in many respects, we don't really know how eco they are, because the actual process by which they're made is a trade secret. Like, it starts out with like a rubber product, but then, when I smell that new rubber mat, it doesn't smell like a rubber tree, And what I discovered was that those long life mats, they do have to be subjected to that OECO Tex standard. So like anything that touches skin in Germany has to go through a certain amount of testing, Mm-hmm. So in a way, I found that because they last so much longer, and we're totally privy to the process throughout its manufacture, even though there's PVC in them, I still feel like it's a more eco product on some level.
Oh yeah,
that was the calculation I made, and I'm happy. I have the same set of mats since I opened 7 years ago. And if they were any other type of mat, they would have already been shredded, and I would have had to re-up them.
Yeah, I of course, I love hearing stories like that, and you're not the first person who's told me this, and people who've had them for 15 years and 20 years sometimes call me. They say, "Oh, I can't believe it that you're still there."
Oh, I'm so glad you're still there. We could talk about that.
Right. That's right.
Making sure you're still there, but So where are we now? You heard about that they were selling Becca, and it was a good fit because you said they had those nice bolsters, and they were great people too.
Well, yeah, they were great people, and before I knew they were even great people, I knew they had the Becca frog. Okay, and I mentioned Yoga International before, but back in the day, they would take ads in Yoga International, and I would see that little frog doing the
tree
standing pose, tree pose, exactly, right? Doing tree pose with the little hands at Namaste, and I just loved that little frog.
It's a cool graphic.
Yes, and so I just wanted to own it. It was just a little nuts, but I just said, that fits in with the way I think of yoga and the way I want to be in the world. And then I talked to Gary, and he was terrific.
Right.
They've been, there's a long history of Baco also. They were one of the early manufacturers of bolsters and other yoga supplies. And they grew to quite a good size at one time when they started out in Oregon.
Well, I mean, there wasn't that many options, even back in 2007. There wasn't, it's certainly not like there is now.
Right, and they'd been doing it for about 10 years or 12 years by then.
Wow.
So they'd been at it for a while. Gary and Marn were not the original owners; they were the second owners.
Oh, okay.
Gary was a manager for the original owners when they were in Oregon, and then he moved it to Arizona when he took it over, and then I brought it back east here. But in any event, it was a real good fit. One of the things that happened that I had to go out there to do my due diligence, right? So I spent a week sleeping in their living room.
That's awesome.
And that was a perfect place to be sleeping because the office was like their den.
Yeah. You got a sense of that when you talked to them. It was like you were in their house hanging out with them,
The warehouse was the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, they did have a storage unit, but it was like smaller than my shed back here at home. I mean, it was a very homegrown operation, and they were really nice people. We went hiking. We went to Thai restaurants. We just had fun, and I got to work on the numbers and figure out what was happening there, and we came to an agreement, and I rented a truck and filled it with their stuff and
drove it back.
Drove it home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, actually, I say that, but I didn't drive it home. I felt like I drove it home. I did help load it.
Somebody else drove that truck.
Yeah, I sent it.
All right, so now you've had Becca as part of yogalifestyle.com since then, and that kind of filled out your whole,
that was suddenly we had gear.
Yeah.
And that was a welcome addition to what we did. It quickly became the biggest part of what we did. Because yoga posters were great for a couple of years, but then after a while, everybody who really wanted one has one now.
There's only so many yoga posters you want on your wall, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's a steady demand for it because there's new studios and new people coming into it and stuff like that. But it's not a high volume item. And books are very good also, but we face, of course, very stiff competition in Amazon.
Right.
And
so let's go there, because I'm betting that since you added the Becca line to your yogalifestyle.com, that things have changed in terms of competition for you. In terms of people buying things online, and now you've got Amazon.
Right.
So how did that impact you? Did you see a huge impact or do you sell on Amazon?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The thing that happened is that, we went on Amazon.
Yeah.
I didn't intend for it to be that important to us, or I didn't know that it would be that important to us. My nephew was visiting one summer, and I needed to give him a part-time job.
Yeah.
And so I had him put a bunch of stuff on Amazon and to see what would happen. But the really interesting thing for me, and kind of difficult thing, but also good because I'm learning to navigate it, is that early on, because we were one of the few yoga vendors, we had very good natural search ranking. Organic search, we'd be number 1 in yoga books. We'd be number 3 in yoga jewelry. We'd be, we just all over. We'd have very high search ranking.
You were there before Amazon was selling that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, whether they had it or they didn't, they just weren't that big at it. And the real thing that they hadn't done yet, and which really has happened, I think, in the last couple of years, is that they must have, I don't really know this, but I guess, I surmise that they get a very good price for Google advertising.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.